Okay. So I am uh, having a little difficulty, of course, with my computers. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do a lot of lectures the way that I wanted to for the end of the semester, unless I can somehow get some technical issues resolved. Um, but what I want to just kind of do is explain what my format is for this week, and then how it's most likely going to be for next week, and then to finish up. So, um, in terms of world events, there are many things going on. You guys were all exposed to quite a bit of the background to many conflicts, but I think it's fair to say for Americans and many Westerners, the fear and the frustration about what to do with terrorism, Muslim terrorism, to be specific, the arguments that Donald Trump has argued, as opposed to some of the arguments made by the Democratic Party, and the general sentiment of people, from Europe to the United States, regarding this question of what's going on. Well, I thought it would be important to expose you all to what the U.S. does or has been involved in, mainly in the Middle East, and the civil conflicts and the wars that have been so pivotal to escalating so much anger throughout the Islamic world, and have been such a draw to a political discourse on many things that many of you are just not understanding or knowing about. So, I'm mainly just going to give you a chain of documentaries to watch. And I'm hoping what you'll do is you'll see a sort of narrative. Now, each documentary has its own type of bias to it. RT is Russian television that's supported by Russia. Al Jazeera is an Arabic Qatar located media station. Now, the one on Gaddafi about being in a state of denial has an anti-Gaddafi bias. I just want to point out, and this was actually pointed out to me by one of my Arabic professors. He's originally from Lebanon, in grad school, that Qatar, because it's located in a monarchy, in an Arab monarchy, Arab republics that tended to be anti-monarchy, like Gaddafi's Libya and in Syria, with Assad, their media has their own kind of political bias against even other Arab nations. So when you're watching a lot of stuff on the Middle East, you can even Wikipedia sometimes the news sources and see, like, there's one news source I was going to put on for you, but it's called Peace TV. It's linked to Iran. I didn't want to put that on. Just because a nation has a kind of propaganda piece media outlet doesn't necessarily mean that some of the stuff isn't true. But, we have to be always, of course, very careful about the bias. I mean, have you ever seen anything pro-Obama on Fox News? Have you ever seen Republicans get mainly the support on CNN? I mean, does it mean that there can't be a certain amount of good news sources to follow on some of these things? But we're not really dealing with a media world that isn't full of kind of its own set of motivations. So I just want to kind of point that out. Now, having said that, I feel like at least getting you exposed to these various documentary clips and some of these interviews will at least get you to understand visually what's going on. Now, the reason why originally I wasn't going to do Gaddafi and Libya, but I thought that it would be important because, Bush has been criticized by people for invading Iraq, a country that didn't attack us. and creating a lot of chaos and lack of stability, which led to the rise of ISIS. And we'll talk about ISIS next week specifically. But Obama's invasion of Libya, well, by using, like, kind of leading NATO forces. So it wasn't just us specifically, and it wasn't the same thing as Iraq. But essentially, we have Libya in the same situation as Iraq, where things are very unstable and there is a lot of chaos. You will see that in one of the documentaries as well. I want to make clear to you, there's warnings in these documentaries, but yes, these are violent. Some of the footage is very awful. But to be honest, the reason why I want you to watch these is that for Americans, we're very focused on terrorism when it affects the West. But the violence that our own nations get entrenched in overseas affairs, I don't think is something that we really have a right to shelter ourselves from. And I don't think it's helping us, because we're not really getting a chance to kind of look and see what is taking place in the world that is creating so much instability, that is giving us so much blowback. Now, I'm not saying that we deserve anything. I'm not actually ever excusing any acts of terrorism, but there is just so much going on to build a context that's different than maybe the way you're seeing it. Okay, now, so I just want you to be exposed and drawn into many of these characters and parts of the world that should be on all the media stations. I mean, don't you think if we're really a free democratic republic and we're going to be so heavily involved in these parts of the world and military interventions and so forth, that we should be having some grasp or knowledge of these things, that a class like this should just be a mere reminder. It shouldn't be the first time you've been exposed to a lot of this stuff, but in fact, that's really what the case is most of the time. Now, in any case, I just wanted to give you this map one more time here. Sorry about all this stuff around this. Here's the Middle East, and there's a picture of North Africa here, because North Africa, and I might have discussed this in some of my earlier lectures, but North Africa does have its place within the Middle East, partly because North Africa, when it turned Islamic, the majority became Muslims. Many then spoke Arabic, and there's a debate about how many Arabs migrated into parts of Africa that created an Arab presence, and how many people just started speaking Arabic after they converted to Islam and became Arabized. Do you get what I'm saying? So, in other words, if I move my family now, if a bunch of white Europeans moved to Africa and created a town, and then we all just started speaking Arabic, and then we converted to Islam, within a generation we look Muslim, right? We sound Muslim, we're talking it, but you know, our ethnic backgrounds are still what they were. So, in other words, the indigenous people of North Africa were these people mainly Arabized, or were there mainly Arab colonization changes? And that's kind of something that I'm still trying to tackle and have an understanding of. Now, having said that, because of this, sub-Saharan Africa is kind of almost categorized in a different set of historical circumstances than with the north and in the eastern parts. Okay, and we can't truly separate them, but just to say that that's why. Egypt, you know, as you see here, it connects itself to the broader Middle East. Almost all of the movies that come out of the Middle East, the Arabic-speaking world, come from Egypt. So Egypt takes on a serious role in, Arab cultural things. Oh goodness, this computer. But it's also one of the most ancient African civilizations. So Egypt is African and simultaneously Arab, or culturally dominated by Arabs, and sees itself as a part of the Arab world. And so it has this kind of complex setting there. And then Libya is the same. Now, what's interesting about Gaddafi, what may or may not be totally clear to you after you watch these documentaries on Libya, and why he became popular with a lot of black Africans, is because he was one of the only, I think he may be the only Arab leader, for all of his eccentricities and his totally heavy-handed ways of handling the population, acknowledged black Africa and the sins, the Arab slave trade and things like that. And so he did a lot to try to balance out the racial inequalities between Arab Africans and black Africans, a kind of racial divide that we don't ever talk about much, or a lot of people don't understand. And unfortunately, as you'll see in one of the other documentary clips, that black African and black Libyans have been really getting a strong backlash with the overthrow of Gaddafi, almost as if they're blamed as all being pro-Gaddafi. And so that racism that was there is being unleashed with the overthrow of Gaddafi. And I just kind of wanted to point that out. Now, also, Gaddafi was interesting in that he had this concept called Jumhuriya. You don't worry about writing it down, but he actually claimed that the whole people ruled, and that he was merely a figurehead of the people. And you'll get a little bit in that in his interviews and some of the documentaries. But in fact, he ruled with an iron fist, and the way that he died and how it went down is really brutal and quite horrific. In any case, whatever one thinks about his legacy, he is no longer here. He met a terrible end, and now Libya is in a state of chaos. And if you look over here, you'll see, here's Syria, okay, where we're covering the civil war. There's Lebanon, okay, and then here is Jerusalem and Israel / Palestine down here, very tiny. There's Jordan. Here's Iraq. Here's Saudi Arabia, okay. Bahrain, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, and then here's Iran. Here's Afghanistan. You'll notice Afghanistan really doesn't count as the Middle East, but they kind of shove it in there. But it's pretty far away from the Middle East. Europe is actually closer over here. Look at Sicily. And you saw in the video that Libya was attacked by the Italians. And you'll see how European colonization happens so much in this area, because look, here's Spain, right? Here's Morocco. They practically touch each other. I think, talk about this in some of my previous lectures, but I just wanted to give you this reminder, okay, that the Mediterranean connects Europe with the Middle East and Africa. And it's something, again, that I think a lot of Americans don't really realize, the proximity factor there. And so, I'm starting off with a short clip of a documentary, again reminding us of some of the ways that the Europeans have intervened in the Middle East, then going into Gaddafi, the Syrian civil war conflict in Assad, and then next week it will be with ISIS and the refugee crisis, and maybe a few more added things that I can put in there. So if you have any questions about anything, I would love for you to call me up, and I will do my best to answer any of them and elaborate more on these topics.